Welcome to Shamanism 110. Warriorship is worship. I'm so happy that you're here, and we're going to talk about all of this now. So, a primary core understanding in shamanism is that energy must flow. The things that move us in the heart have to move us into action. That is the motivation that we have to come from. This means allocating our resources of time, energy, and money to be moved in the direction of things that really bring us alive. And I sincerely hope that we may do this each day, step by step, choice by choice. Because as we move our energies and our resources into those things that motivate our hearts, we will change the very construct and fabric of our lives. Because we are here as free entities, we have the power of making choices. We can change everything. We can choose to walk away. We can commit to something new, or we can commit to staying where we are. Now, if we want to create change, we have to take big action, and we have to take that action so that we can bring ourselves into greater alignment. And when we do that, when we come into greater alignment within ourselves, we inspire others, not by what we say, but who we become. And so the important thing to understand is that action matters. It matters. It's very important in terms of your relationship with the spirit world, because if you say one thing and then you do something else, issue. So you're going to have to watch what you're doing, because that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. That's where you're affecting the physical world, and that's what matters. So it's not to say to those of you who are here mastering the art of being to not do anything, because being is a doing. So how do we take action? How do we take action when we're at that point in life when we know we need to change? And how do we take action in a way of worship? We have to be willing to do what it takes, step after step after step. Understanding that action isn't one big boom thing and then we can just sit back down again. It's a continual journey of listening to the heart and taking step after step after step. So I want to talk about the warrior within, and this is a resource and a teaching from the Toltecs. It's a very old, new way of looking at warriorship and the wisdom and the inspiration that we use to cultivate the spirit of the warrior. So how do we attend to the warrior within? There's so many warriors, or soldiers at least, who are out there dying on both sides of whatever the fence, this idea of separation, is happening in the world around us. And the reason for that is that those of us who aren't out there dying on the front lines, we have the luxury of our lives, but we also have the luxury of coming to understand this real warrior, the mature warrior, not through the metaphor of fighting, but paying attention and standing up. And we can stand up as well to greet those soldiers as they come home, and we can help them by doing what needs to be done here on the home front. We can be those people who greet these warriors to bring them back, to help with the healing that they need after the harrowing experiences that they had, and help create paths for them to follow into their mature warrior and owning themselves. If we don't have what it takes to show up, we can't provide a context. And if we can't provide a context, there's no space for healing. This is really the understanding, the deep understanding of the mature warrior. There's no way around it. We have to grow up. We can't continue to try to get everything we want with the maturity of a 12-year-old. We have to be spiritual, energetic, emotional adults. So the warrior within leads to this understanding of the enemy within. And the other understanding that's really important is that this modern culture, the promises that it's given you are empty promises. Worshipping these false gods. Sorry, I put the Kardashians here, but you know who I mean. These false material gods is not worship. Action happens when we begin to take steps and grow up and make choices in life that create a different quality of life to take shape and materialize in our lives. It is your responsibility to consciously engage in that relationship with the enemy within and all the fears that arise from this enemy within. These fears that we have are not something to be afraid of, but they're signs that life gives us to help us come back to the enemy within and to transform that relationship. Because the spiritual warrior is intentionally wanting to transform the enemy within. If the shadow inside is disowned through fear or judgment, how would you know? How would you know if you stumbled into your shadow if you disowned it? So these patterns that we have within, these enemies that we create within us, are many variations on one theme. And that theme is misunderstandings or false beliefs around who you are. So coming back to the warrior within is part feminine, part masculine warrior. And this is that dynamic tension between these two parts, the imagination and the expression, these two pulsing presentations of the mature warrior as one human being. This warrior within is an expression of the creative force in all things and the action, the quality of the action. So we're using the combination of these different archetypes. We have to work with the visionary as well, because the visionary helps the warrior engage with life and see how to engage with life in a good way. What is the right use of power? This is my thing. I want to create it. I want to do something in life. I want to transform something, whatever it is. How do I do that in a good way? Not just for myself, but how do I do that in a way that is good for all living beings? And we have to be willing to take a stand. We have to be willing to speak the truth. We have to be willing in the moment to say, no, that's not what I want. This is what I committed to. We have to work on our communication. We have to know what we're standing up for. This is where it begins. The willingness to take a stand is what you build your warriorship on. It's what you build your worship on. We have to be willing to take a stand, because it's through these actions that we begin to move out of being lost and distracted in the minutiae of life and these little details that aren't important. When we talk about the willingness to do whatever it takes, this is the fundamental power, the art of transformation, which is what the warrior is all about. What is it going to take for each of us to get to a place where we're willing to engage in solutions that are actually solutions? What are we going to do differently? And more importantly, how do we become the people that can do something different? So, distractions, because this is what gets in the way. When we start to stand up, when we're willing to take a stand, we begin to engage energy in a way that shifts our perspective on ourselves and on our life. And all these little things that don't really matter start to fall away, and we give rise to a perspective on our life where we see things moving in the true pattern, in the true flow of things. And we start to realize what is ultimately the cause of warfare anywhere on the planet. We start to pull our energy away from that and give our time, energy, love, and money to those things that are life-affirming, to those things that allow people to live together in diversity and harmony, where we can harvest the great wealth and the benefit of being diverse together. We can't sit around waiting for other people to step up. We can't wait for some president or leader to find the right answer for us. Each of us have to do the work. Each of us have to do the work as individuals of becoming these people the world needs for things to change. So we're going to talk about worship, because true warriorship is worship. Worship is a pattern. Worship is a pattern of showing up. The basics of worship is willingness to show up, willingness to engage with life, to be present, to speak the truth, to have authenticity, meaning what's on the inside is what we're showing on the outside, to honor our boundaries. It's really basic stuff. It doesn't mean really complex, crazy rituals. True ceremony, the true meaning of real ceremony, is an opportunity to be present, to be authentic with one another, to show up in a meaningful way. And you have opportunities for this hundreds, if not 1,000 times every day. Worship is the willingness to put your energy into something bigger than yourself. And when you do that, your life starts to jump up. It moves up into this other realm, and you start to get perspective on what's really going on. When we wield the sword of truth, when we take right action, we cut through the stagnation and the suffocation that is inherent in a lot of human dynamics, and we take out the tiredness of life, and we slice through into the heart. And we bring others into that possibility, into that mythic realm. Worship brings us into the mystical. We enter into that realm when we start engaging with life in a real way. That realm where real energies are, where the real happenings take place. So the most interesting part about warriorship as a contemporary shaman is the transformation. And we've talked about this before in the spiral. If you've looked at the introduction material, you know about this as well. Each archetype has an energy pattern, and not these kind of mundane energy patterns in the ordinary consensual reality, but the patterns of our stories, the stories of our life. So each archetype has a transformational program, and the warrior transforms through love. The warrior's transformation happens through goodness in the heart. And that goodness will allow the other to heal the wounds that we infected. So the right transformation is bringing our enemy and turning it into an ally. Not killing the enemy, not murdering, not going out with this intention, but a true warrior, true spiritual warrior, understands that the initiation of a shaman, the awareness of death, which is the first part of the heart, it's the healer energy, understands through death the meaning of life. And then the warrior transforms through love. So we also know about the visionary and the master. So each chamber of the heart has a unique power. And we're best able to orchestrate the song of our life, the transformation of our being, if all 4 chambers of our hearts are available and operational. And even if you're the most compassionate person, if you're operating out of only one chamber of your heart, the chamber that you're most comfortable in, that kind of role you've taken on, even if you've developed a great capacity to access your heart, but you're working through one chamber, you are not at your full potential. And even really advanced practitioners, and we see this all the time, they're working with at least 1 or 2 chambers that are not yet fully functional. So this is work, people. This is work, and it takes time. We have to be willing to engage in whatever it takes to heal, so that we can figure out one way or another what needs to be done, and have the willingness to show up for whatever it takes to transform through love. And that transformation through love is always having our enemy being transformed into an ally. So the transformation through death is not being tended by the healer, and the transformation through love is not being tended by the warrior, because those who carry the vision are not attending the dream, they're attending to a fantasy. So we have to move with all of these energies. The transformation through love happens also through the attention of the healer, through the attention of the master, through the attention of the visionary. We have to work with all 4 if we really want to transform ourselves. Without the healer, without the master, without the warrior, without the visionary, we're lost. Without the warrior, the visionary is going to be in all these false ideas, right? Like no discernment of what's going on. A true visionary must be free from attachment to outcome. The master is the one who creates the outcome. The visionary receives the vision. So thinking again about the modern kind of culture that we're in, modern society, we don't have leaders in charge who have these 4 parts of their hearts open and active. We don't. When was the last time you heard of a leader who's not attached to the outcome of what they're doing, for example? So how do we embrace our enemy in such a way that we can turn them into allies? Discernment. Discernment. And again, discernment is not from the mind. Discernment comes from the heart. So a challenge that happens, for example, with these world leaders who have not mastered the art of worship before they come into power. So when they are calling on their inner warrior, it's very easy or inevitable even that they move into the shadow of the warrior. Because the only way to be in a healthy relationship with our inner warrior is for us to have the true capacity of discernment. Discernment means we're able to see what's actually going on and to see which is the path of truth in this particular moment, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to get the clarity about what's going on and then take action on that clarity. When we have discernment, we're able to transform our enemy into an ally, not through death, but through relationship, through connection, through communication, and ultimately through love, through compassion. So instead of running around and seeing everything around ourselves as being dark and evil, this is the shadow of the warrior being expressed. When we blame others for the evil that's actually within ourselves, we feel that, the other is evil and we should eradicate them. We need to kill them all. The warrior can only be in true warriorship when they believe in the good in the other and the capacity in the other's goodness to help, so that we can help them heal the infection in their wounding. So the shadow of the warrior means that we are not discerning. We don't know how to be in relationship with power. And of course, when we're in the wrong relationship with our power, it's not good. So the visionary piece of the warrior discernment means that the visionary has to know what is the right action, and the warrior has to then trust the visionary to take that action. So if you're living with a weak warrior and you're triggered by fear-based beliefs, that means you can't be in the present moment. You're not able to be discerning because you're frozen in the past. You're stuck in a fear-based story that's telling you not what's going on in the moment, but what you are afraid could be going on. So the warriorship means to stand naked. To stand naked and free from your past stories, to not be holding on to the past, but to be ready and present for the future. So this involves having a certain sense of nakedness and vulnerability. To be a hero or a heroine, we need to respond in the moment to what's actually happening in the moment. If we come into the moment full of old fear-based stories, we are not in the story we think we're in. Or we're in the story we think we're in, but we're not in reality. Maybe that's a better way to say it. And when we're not in reality, we are in our mind. And when we're in our mind, we can be recreating old patterns, the same patterns that we experienced last time. We might be surviving, but we're not thriving. So discernment is an incredibly important capacity for us to develop. Another part of the warrior that we need to talk about is the rebellion part, the rebel. And when we see this rebellious energy, it's sort of a counterbalance that's also happening in the shadow. So we need to understand in ourselves when we rebel and why we rebel. Why we rebel against our discipline, for example. Why we rebel against our worship. Why we're rebelling against our commitments. Why we're rebelling against our intimate relationships. Whatever we're rebelling against, what is it that we're really fighting? And what is it that we think we're supposed to be doing with our lives? All of this is misuse of power. We can't run that power through true warriorship. So coming out of this idea of the rebel, so that we're not always fighting against. Because it's not that it's power, but there's a lot of power in the rebel, but the power is being misused. And in that misuse, we're not being discerning. So that means we're throwing our energy into patterns that are not life-affirming. For example, people who jump into a rebellious group, or people who, are so fed up with their own biological families that they jump into the lap of some guru and let their inner authority be projected onto that guru so that they don't have to take responsibility for themselves. Guru could be replaced by some kind of leader or a president or whoever, thinking that somebody outside of you is going to fix it, and you're fighting for their cause, fighting for somebody else's battle, fighting for somebody else's dream. And when we do that and we project our authority onto somebody else, inevitably, eventually, there's going to be a fall from grace. Because it's an inappropriate projection. It's an inappropriate, wrong use of power. So we're going to talk about one more shadow of the warrior, which is choosing to be invisible. And this is really challenging. This is a challenging idea to understand, but we need to understand. I need you to understand. I'm asking you to understand that most people deal with their life experience and their trauma by shutting down their power, by making themselves invisible. You have to understand that this is also an abuse of power, because you can't opt out. That it doesn't work like that. We're beings of free will. You can't switch that off. Trying to be invisible, trying to hide, doesn't work. We are always taking action, and the actions we're taking are always creating reality. When we make ourselves invisible, when we abandon ourselves, when we, give our souls away, something else steps in and takes that action for us. So I'm talking about people whose relationship with power has been hurt. They're afraid of power. They're afraid of stepping up. They're afraid of whatever's going to happen. So one way of becoming invisible is they jump on somebody else's coattails. We talked about it before, and project all of their power onto another external authority, for example. That is not what we came here to do. There are ways of being invisible in the moment that can be really useful, and I'm not saying that. It's a really good skill to have, to know how to be invisible, at certain times, but it's not a way to live. So this is another way that the warrior can be in its shadow. So another aspect of the warrior that is in the light is vulnerability. So warriorship has a relationship with vulnerability, because vulnerability is a dance. It's knowing how to move with it, how to be with it, and how to respond to it. When we're willing to do whatever it takes, we're being vulnerable. So being able to discern whatever it takes, being able to discern what the right action is, being willing to do whatever it takes, includes asking for help. Vulnerability means that we are free to ask for what we need. So sometimes this kind of inner terrified kid who's stuck learns to be willing to do it at all costs. And the all costs for many children in these moments is to sort of sell out, or to let go of ourselves, to cut parts of our soul off. And this is what leads to soul loss. This kind of desperate act at all cost is not what I'm talking about. Doing whatever it takes is not the same as doing it at all costs. So that's a real important distinction as well. That's dynamic of a true warrior, doing whatever it takes, but not at all cost, not at any price. And you get that big piece of yourself coming back when you can get out of this pattern of at any cost. Because when you're doing it at any cost, when you're willing to give your inner peace away, when you're willing to go against your truth, you are handicapping yourself in a deeply profound way. So, how to be a warrior, how to be a spiritual warrior, how to awaken the warrior within. Do whatever it takes to get yourself back. And with yourself back, all these issues around facing your fears will melt away. Have discernment. When you have discernment, the art of the day is not a task that you can't get right, because you know where you are. And when you know where you are, you know what to do. With discernment, we have this ability to come into right relationship with ourselves. And when we can be in right relationship with ourselves, we can be in right relationship with others. And we can then transform our enemies into allies. These are the daily acts of worship. Grow up. Show up. Stand up. We train day in and day in and day in, step after step after step. We're coming out of being in this codependent slavery mindset of consumerism, that it takes work to get someone. This is not who we are. Remember your true nature. It's your true nature to live as a warrior in the world and to master the art of transforming the enemies that you meet along the way, whether they're inside or outside, into allies. And with your allies, your gifts will be brought into the world. So I'm going to leave you with a few questions. What are you willing to do? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to draw your resources out of the shadow? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to draw yourself out of the places and the ways that you've experienced so long in your life that you can move out of these old patterns now? Are you willing to worship? Are you willing to stand up? Are you willing to show up every day? Are you willing to grow up? Thank you. Thank you for your time and your attention.